Alright guys, how are you tonight? Or, well, it's nighttime for me. It's hard to say what it is for you, but how are you? It's been a while since I filmed one of these video lectures. It's actually been months because of my neurological problems with my ears. So I might be a little rusty here, bear with me. And, okay, let's get the show on the road. This is a very lengthily titled video lecture, Westward Expansion, Texas, California, and the Mexican-American War of 1846 to 1848. So, all right, where are we going to start with this? Well, we're going to start with this. Right after the War for Independence, which came to an end in 1783, there was a couple of years while the Americans were kind of figuring things out. They write the Constitution in 1787. It's ratified by 1789. And you have this tremendous expansion that's going on all during this time over the Appalachian Mountains, which are right here. Lots of expansion into these western territories that were acquired as a result of the War of Independence from the British. You have the Northwest Territory of the Ohio River Valley, then you have the South Territory of the Ohio River Valley. Virginia owns what's going to be Kentucky. That's filling up with people. There's also lots of people coming into these territories. The bottom line is that Americans are heading west because they're looking for land and they're looking for opportunity. In 1787, Thomas Jefferson drafts a document called the Northwest Ordinance. And in that document, which is approved by Congress, slavery is abolished north of the Ohio River, which is right here. So in this entire region, which is going to become Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, no slavery. So the advocates of slavery, the people that want to plant cotton and tobacco and other things, but particularly cotton, that are heading west, they know that they've got to head into these areas south of the Ohio River, areas which are going to become Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and etc. Okay, now, we're talking about 1790. About 30 years later, 1819, this is what the map of the United States looks like. Purple, free states, and then free territories. Red, slave states, slave territories. Okay, now forget about the Missouri Compromise. We're not going to talk about that right now. The reason that I'm using this map is because it shows you very clearly in 1819 where the boundary line is between the free North and the slave South. Now, as you can see, Southerners and slave owners are moving west more quickly than the Northerners are. That's because the soil in the deep south, this region that they called the Black Belt, black not really because there were tremendous numbers of black slaves, but because the soil, it was like chocolate cake mix, man. Like, it was so dark and so rich and so fertile. You could make so much money there producing cotton and other things, but cotton in particular, as long as you had a lot of slaves. So there's a lot of expansion, a lot of land speculators heading out west and claiming lands to sell to people that are going to come on later. But here's the problem. Hang on a second. The problem is that right here, there's a boundary line between the United States and Mexican possessions, okay? So what's going on right here with these United States Mexican possessions? What does that mean, Mexican possessions? Is it Mexico? Well, hold on just a minute. Let's hold that thought for a second. In 1793, Eli Whitney invented a labor-saving device called the cotton gin. If you've ever asked yourself, what's a gin? I mean, gin is booze, right? Like a gin martini or gin on the rocks, gin and vermouth. What is a cotton gin? Well, engine, E-N-G-I-N-E. When you try to say cotton engine fast, oh, it's a cotton engine, a cotton engine, a cotton engine, cotton gin. Yeah, it's cotton gin. They just cut the N out, the middle part, the first part of engine, and it just became a cotton gin. The first cotton gins were these small contraptions that you could put on a table and just operate by hand. You shut the lid, you put the cotton in the top, excuse me, and then you turn this crank, and these teeth would pull at the cotton and separate it from the seeds, the bramble, and the stem. All of that would fall down on the bottom, and there was like a drawer that you could pull out, like in a parakeet's cage or any bird cage, to take all the old seed and the bird crap and all that out, right? Okay, well, after a number of years, they made bigger and bigger and bigger cotton gins, which were able to process more and more and more cotton, which led to more and more and more expansion into the west part of the South, because they want to get more lands to produce more cotton. They got to buy more slaves to do that. More slaves equals more cotton, and a need for more land. And when I get more land, I should buy some more slaves to get more cotton. So it was this tremendous like snowball effect spreading across the South. The ironic thing is that Eli Whitney originally thought that the cotton gin would bring an end to slavery. Why do you need all these slaves when just one guy can operate this machine to process the cotton? He thought slavery would be phased out, but instead these greedy southern landowners, they just wanted to get even more land to grow even more cotton and buy even more slaves. It actually made slavery bigger than ever. Okay, if you look at these two maps, here we are in 1790, and you can see where the population density of slaves are in the young United States. We've only been operating under the Constitution at this point for 1 year. Washington's president. Okay. So in the North, either slavery's been abolished, like in Massachusetts, or the slave population is very small, 10% or less. Okay, now bigger in the orange, way bigger in the red. Okay, now look at 1860. Granted, that's 70 years later. This is the year before the Civil War. But look at how slavery is spread into the South. Okay, notice it's gone almost entirely in the North, right? But the South has gone crazy. You can see, look at the black belt down here, guys. Look at all this red, dark red down in here, where there's these huge cotton kingdoms producing unbelievable amounts of what the Southerners call king cotton, right? Because cotton was the backbone of their economy. So slavery just got bigger and bigger than ever. In fact, slaves became so desirable in the black belt, in the deep or the lower South. People would pay so much money for them that most of the slaves of this region were sold either by these land routes that the slave trade operated, or down the rivers like so, or by water around to Pensacola, Mobile, New Orleans, up the Mississippi River. Most of the slaves of the old slave-owning regions, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, even Kentucky, were actually sold down into those areas of the South where slaves were much more valuable, because they could earn you so much more money. Okay, now getting back to this map, the problem for the South is that when they get to the far side of Louisiana, they've been going like gangbusters across the end of Georgia and Alabama, Mississippi, and through Tennessee and into Missouri. Okay, but when they get here, they realize that they've run out of places to expand into. There's nowhere else that they can go. Pardon me for just a moment. They can't continue to go west, because across the Sabine River is another country. Okay, when they were expanding west out of South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia, heading into Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, they were just fighting Indians and beating Indians. That was easy. Well, it wasn't easy, but it wasn't complicated. What's complicated is when you run to the far side of Louisiana and you realize that you can't go anywhere else. You can't invade somebody else's country and start growing cotton there, because that might create a war between that country and the United States. And fighting some other great big country with an army and a navy and etc. is different than fighting smaller groups of Indians who have been decimated by disease. It's a whole other ballpark. Okay, now let's consider this. What does this mean? Mexican possessions. What is this exactly? What's going on around 1819, 1820? Well, in 1810, most of the Spanish-American colonies revolted and started a war for independence against Spain, the same way that we did 35 years earlier in 1776 against the British. Okay, that started in 1810. By 1819, when we're running into this problem here in the South, the war is just about done. At that point, Spain is trying to figure out how to withdraw from all of this having lost almost all of her colonies, bitter, resentful, angry, but they can't win. They're trying to figure out how to negotiate a peace with their former colonies and arrange things to their best advantage. And basically, by 1819, a new and independent nation called Mexico is coming into being. Okay? So at this point in the storyline, a couple of interesting characters step onto the historical stage. It's a father and son team, Moses, the dad, and Stephen, who you see right here with his faithful hunting dog, Austin. Maybe you've heard of Austin, Texas, right? Austin, deep in the heart of Texas? Okay, well, named after this guy right here, Stephen Austin. It was his dad that came up with this big idea, and the idea was maybe we could go into Mexico and grow cotton and settle and develop the region, live there, cut some kind of a deal with this new Mexican government. They'll get something out of it. We'll get something out of it. So Moses Austin set this whole thing in motion. But it was his son Stephen that really carried the ball to the finish line because Moses died. Okay? So here's what happens. Stephen Austin heads down to Mexico City. He negotiates a deal with the government in Mexico City, this new Mexican government, and the deal is this. They say, okay, we are going to give you the title of impresario. Impresario basically means the big shot in charge. And we're going to give you a big piece of land. Now, dig the cursor here, guys. This right here is Austin's colony. You can see it right there. Austin's coastal colony, okay? So there's the really nice coastal region and the interior region, which is not quite as great, but still. Now look at this piece of land again, okay? This is a very small part of what is going to be the state of Texas, somewhere further down the line, all right? Texas is gigantic, right? The second biggest state in the Union today after Alaska, okay? But guys, this little piece of Texas is bigger than the state of Maryland, the state of Delaware, the New Jersey, Rhode Island, okay? Because Texas is that big. Even a little piece of Texas is much bigger than some of the states back east. So they say, we're going to give you this big piece of real estate. Oops. Austin says, okay. And they say, now here's the deal. You will agree to bring settlers into this region, and they're going to improve the land. Right, says Austin. Now, what does it mean to improve land? Well, improving land means make it more valuable. Farm on it, ranch on it, build stuff, start towns, expand the towns that are already there, you know, build a road or two, whatever you might need. Improve the land, okay? So, okay, great. You've got to learn to speak Spanish. Everybody up there, you know, you're going to take some Spanish classes, bilingual ed, right? Spanish, right? Stephen says, "Sí, I'm digging your scene." Got it, okay? Next, you've all got to convert to Catholicism because Mexico is a Catholic nation. So this is going to be tricky because these Southerners are not Catholics. They're Protestants. They're not crazy about Catholics. But Stephen Austin kind of says to himself, well, I'll figure that out when I get back home, right? But so he says, right, sí, got it. Okay, next, you've got to obey the laws of Mexico. You're a bunch of Americans living in Mexico. You will obey our laws. Right. I get it. Great. Okay. Now, Stephen Austin goes back up to Louisiana, and he gets a bunch of people there. Okay? Let's check this out. Read along with me. In 1822, Stephen Austin brings the first settlers to Texas. This group, they were called, well, they weren't at the time, but later on they were called the Old 300. Okay, 300 families. Not people, but families. Man, wife, and the kids. Okay, 300 families. He brings them in. Then he gets permission to bring 900 more. And then more people are going to come and more. But okay, these settlers, they signed contracts. And the terms of the contracts were this. Every head of a family bringing livestock with them to breed. Pigs, cows, horses, sheep even, okay, whatever. They were given a square league of land, or 4,428 acres, absolutely free of charge. Men who brought in valuable property, such as, pardon me, slaves, agricultural machinery, like a cotton gin, or larger numbers of livestock. They got more acres, depending on what sort of property it was and how much of it they brought. Okay? Some of these guys received 40,000 acres of land free. Okay? And in addition, all colonists were exempt from taxes for 7 or 10 years. Didn't have to pay any taxes at all within the colony. Okay? They don't owe their government, the colonial government there, under Austin. They don't have to pay any taxes there. Okay, great. Now, I know that some of this is hard to visualize because you guys, I know you're going, I don't know what an acre, what does an acre look like exactly? What is this, right? How much land is 4,428 acres or 40,000? Okay, I'm guessing that most of you have been to Disneyland, right? So, Disneyland, the California Great Adventure Park, downtown Disney, and all the hotels and the parking lots, okay? Look at this picture. I've got it here for you guys. I put it together for you. Here's an aerial view of all that real estate. That's 430 acres, okay? 430. The minimum size of a land grant was 10 times bigger than that. 10 times. That was the smallest. And some of them got not 4,000, but 40,000 acres, okay? And it's at the same time, in any other part of the United States, land is being sold for $1.25 an acre. But here it's free. You've just got to meet these various conditions, right? Okay, so people start coming, and more come, and more come. By 1830, there's about 20,000 Americans in Austin's colony and around Austin's colony, in East Texas, basically. Okay. 20,000 Americans, free Americans, 1,000 slaves, and there's about 5,000 Mexicans that were already there, right, before any Americans ever showed up. Okay, I want you to consider this for a minute, guys. Pardon me. Spain had started to colonize Tejas, right? It wasn't Texas yet. Tejas. They started colonizing way up there in the north, way back around 1700. 1700. So now it's 1822, 25, 30. It's 125 years later, something like that, right? There's only 5,000 Mexicans there. They used to be Spaniards. Now they're Mexicans, okay? But there's only 5,000 of them. Yet within 10 years, there's 21,000 people that have come from the United States, right? 20,000 Americans, 1,000 slaves. So why is it that there's so few Mexicans after 125 years, and within a decade, you've got 5 times that many Americans, or 4 times that many Americans, pardon me. Okay, now, the stereotypical response to this, especially from racists, okay, because Mexicans are lazy. Everybody knows Mexicans are lazy. They take a damn nap every afternoon, a siesta. They don't work. Mexicans, they could never even put up enough energy and get up enough gumption to go up there and actually occupy Texas, right? Took hard-working Americans. Okay, well, this is a bunch of nonsense. Had nothing to do. Mexicans are not lazy. They're smart that they take a nap every day. I do. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. Yeah, that's all nonsense, okay? The problem with Tejas, from the Mexican point of view, or the Spanish point of view, I should have said, is what they called Indios Barbaros, or barbarian Indians, scary Indians, killer Indians, okay? 2 Indian groups in particular, the Apache and the Comanche. Seriously scary Indians who loved killing Spaniards, settling down in their general part of the world. These are paintings done by one of the most famous American painters of the West, the landscape, the Indians, and so on. This guy, George Catlin, okay? Get a kind of sense here of, you know, what these people look like. Just a second, make sure I'm going the right way. Yeah, okay. If you look at this map, here you see Texas, right? If you look down in here, East Texas, here's the Sabine River that was the boundary between Louisiana, okay, and Texas. So you're talking about a lot of people coming into this general region, okay, not up into the main range of movement for the Comanche, who would ride down from the north into this region and back up again, they like this, or the Apache, who came from the west and back like this. Every year the Apache would pass through this region. Every year the Comanche would pass through this region. They didn't run into each other too much, but what they both became aware of is that there were lots of these Spaniards moving into the river valleys, okay, in this area. And so they began to make war upon them, okay, and basically make their lives miserable. They terrorized them, okay, to put it bluntly. They did a lot of scalping. Here's a lovely painting of someone having been scalped by an Indian. Here's a photograph of a guy years later in 1884 that was scalped by the Sioux. I mean, look at that, guys. Like that used to be a scalp, and then it scabbed over, and it grew new skin and healed. But that's not a good look. I mean, do you think that guy ever got another date for like the rest of his life? I don't think so. So they scalped, they terrorized. Their favorite thing to do to the Spaniards was kidnap them. Just grab somebody when nobody was looking, nobody saw it coming. If they could grab women, they kept them forever. They became wives. They were forced to join the tribe. They got a husband. They bore children. Right. But with guys, it was different. They'd kidnap a guy, Pedro or Julio or, Esteban or whoever, and they'd take them off 10, 20, 50, 100 miles away to places that they knew about, right, where there were nice, big, tall cactus like these right here. And then they would tie the guy with his back to the cactus facing the east, so that every day when the sun came up, it would really burn into that guy all the way up until about noon when it got up above his head, right? And what they would do is, first of all, you're tied to the cactus, all spiked up in the back. This is miserable, right? Nude. Okay, and then they would start flaying you. I don't know if you guys know what it means to flay something. It means to remove the skin, the flesh. So first they'd like take the skin off one of your fingers, like your pinky. They strip it right off, okay? And then they'd show it to you and say, hey, see what we did? It used to be your finger, right? On the guys, yeah, right? And then they would take like one of your arms and sort of take the sleeve off of your arm, just flay the arm. Then they'd flay a leg, okay? And they were experts at not letting you bleed to death. They would just do this for days and days, a couple of weeks, remove more and more of your skin. At a certain point, they cut your eyelids off so that every day when that sun came up, 80, 90, 100 degrees, 105, 110, just burning right into your eyes and just boiling your brain like scrambled eggs, right? Just you go crazy from the pain, the torture, the horrible. They would take your skin, chop it all up, mix it up with a bunch of corn and beans and chilies and things like that, good stuff, right? Make a stew out of it. They have them fed you at this point for like a week, and then they come up and feed you, and you're like, oh, yeah, right. And then they say, hey, look, this used to be your finger, or whatever, and sort of make it clear to you what you were eating. Then you vomit. Oh, horrible, right? This is horrible. Now, if you were a super macho and you gave them a lot of shit, you didn't cry for your mother or whatever, Dios mío or whatever, if you were tough, they would take you back home sometimes and drop you off, missing a lot of your skin or whatever, but they'd actually bring you back to your town. Right? Oh, look at Pedro. Yeah, God, right? Okay. Or another thing that they did is they would take you to where there were big red ant colonies. They'd strip you, stake you out nude, coat all of your interesting parts, genitals, armpits, all around your face and your ears with honey. And then they just leave you there and let the red ants invade your body and go inside and chew away at you. And then vultures would come and coyotes and, just horrible. Okay, Indios Barbaros, right? Scary Indians. And let me put it to you this way, guys. Maybe you've heard of the Apache helicopter, like the scariest helicopter that the United States military has. The helicopter that carried those dudes, SEAL Team 6 in to croak Osama bin Laden, right? when the United States military names a weapon of destruction after you, that means that you were scary badasses. Okay? The Apaches, scary badasses, and the Comanche too. So, okay. It was the Indians that put such a cramp into the lives of the Spanish colonists, okay, up in Mexico. But then the Americans show up. They've got tremendous number of guns, tremendous numbers of bullets, okay? They make the lives of these Indian attack, they make them miserable. The Indians all of a sudden realize, well, this is not going to be like some picnic down here anymore. The Mexicans are thrilled to have them there because they're developing the region, they're improving it, they're shooting Indians with lots and lots of big American bullets. This is great. Okay, now, let's consider the terms of the deal, right? Bring the settlers, improve the land, speak Spanish, become Catholic, obey our laws. Okay. Did the settlers come? Yes. Check. Did they improve the land? You betcha. More than the Mexican government could have ever dreamed possible, to be honest. Did they learn to speak Spanish? You know, some of them did. Some of them did, sure. A lot of them became fluent, like Stephen Austin, totally fluent. Some of them were completely racist, totally prejudicial towards the Mexicans because they were like half black, half Indian. They, you know, remember, these are Southerners. They come from a society where there's two kinds of people, white people and black people. And the black people don't get much respect, right? Okay, so there's a lot of these Southerners are not crazy about the Mexicans. Hell, I wouldn't speak a goddamn Mexican word if you were burning me to death. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it for $10,000, right? I mean, no, they're not gonna, unless they're ordering food, right? Give me one of them damn burritos, and don't look at me that way, right? They call food by the right name, but okay, most of the people, the great majority in the middle, between the fluent and the non, you know, they spoke some Spanish. It tended to be the men that spoke the most Spanish were the men that married Mexican women, okay? Because, trust me, out of every 100 people, yeah, probably about every 100 people or 100 Americans in Texas, about 1 or 2 of them were women, and almost every one of them was prostitute. Prostitute, right? I can't marry no whore. I'm a landowner. I got 2 slaves. I'm an important man, right? I can't marry no prostitute, right? My old mother would be spinning in her grave. So guess what? Boy, I do like that little senorita over there, huh? That's a good-looking guy. What's her name? Little Maria. Well, now, what are you going to do if you want to get with little Maria? And I mean marriage, right? But what are you going to do? You got to go to the house, right? Take your hat off. You say, Buenos noches, Mamacita Doña, what would her name be? Guadalupe, Doña Guadalupe, right? Como estas, right? You got to learn a little bit of Spanish to impress the mom, the family, and then the girl's going to teach you some, and pretty soon you're married. Hey, you speak a little Spanish, right? Makes sense. Okay. So the third thing in the deal, some Spanish. Catholicism, almost non-existent. Okay, forget it. That just wasn't going to ever happen, barely at all. Almost nobody's converted to Catholicism. Are they obeying the laws of Mexico? Tricky. You know, for the most part, everything's fine. The Americans get along with the Mexicans, and for 10 years, it's groovy. You know, but there are some problems that the American settlers have with the laws of Mexico. One of the big problems is the system of justice. They're used to American states and the American federal government that's got a very comprehensive system of justice and law enforcement set up with a lot of courts and a lot of judges and a lot of law enforcement. And the thing is, if you've got some problem in Texas that you need to sort out legally, you have to travel 500 miles south to Saltillo. That's the closest court. Okay, now think about that, guys. Think about wherever you live. I'm going to assume most of you live around LA or in LA. Let's just say, you know, imagine if anytime you had to go to court, like for a traffic ticket, you had to go to San Francisco or Phoenix, you know, or Denver or something like that. So there are some problems with the legal system and obeying the laws of Mexico, but not the end of the world, okay? Well, the bottom line is that Mexico was very unstable in her early years of independence, but by 1828, she's kind of got her act together, and the government decides that they need to sort of look into exactly what's going on up there in Texas because they hear sort of rumors about it. They're not too sure what's up. So they send this general, Manuel Mier y Terán, okay, to head on up north and sort of look into things up here. All right? And what they find is that there's way more Americans than they ever imagined. And that they've got way more guns than they ever imagined. Okay? Now, Tehran travels all around. Everybody seems pretty friendly. They're not too crazy about the legal system, as I said, you know, and they kind of complain about that and so on and so forth. But whatever. The bottom line is that Tehran returns to the south, makes a report to his government, and the report very simply says, there's a ton of Mexicans. They've got more guns and bullets than you can believe. There's more of them coming every day. There's people coming in. And sooner or later, there's going to be enough of them that they're going to declare independence, and we're not going to own Texas anymore. Okay, so the government starts thinking about what are we going to do? How can we get them under control? Because they don't have a lot of guns or a big military. Or Tehran has made it pretty clear to them that I would not recommend going out there and trying to take over. And, you know, we got to figure this out in a different way. So they pass a couple of laws to try to get a hold of things up there. The first law that they pass says no more American immigration into Texas, meaning the Sabine River is now the border and it's closed. Okay? Nobody's allowed to come in anymore. Well, come on. Is this going to stop Americans that want land from coming across the river? Is it going to stop them from coming by boat, by sea? It's not going to stop anybody. The same way that the border with Mexico doesn't stop Mexicans from coming north to the United States to make some good money and have a better life. Think about it, guys. It's really ironic. Originally, the Americans were invading Mexico for better jobs and better opportunities. Very ironic, right? The way things turn around. Whatever. This law only makes the American settlers in Texas like more aggravated. Okay, they're feeling even more hostile towards the Mexican government. But then in 1830, they really get irritated because in 1830, President Vicente Guerrero abolishes slavery in Mexico. This is a famous mural by Jose Clemente Orozco that was done in 1936. Sort of portraying the great moment, right? Here's the law in Guerrero's hand and the sort of gesture like obey, right? And okay, hey, yeah. So slavery abolished in Mexico. Okay, but do you really think that when the American slave owners in Texas, when they hear about this, what are they going to do? Are they going to really give up their slaves? Are they going to obey this law? Of course they're not. They're not going to do anything like that. They're only going to get more and more aggravated. And so between... Oh, that's a typo right there, 1936. I'm sorry, guys. I should say 1830. My bad. At any rate, between 1830 and 1836, the situation between the Americans and the Mexican government just becomes more tense and more problematic and more difficult. Okay, now, why does it become so much more difficult? Well, mainly because of this guy, General Antonio Lopez de Santana. Okay, Santana was a general, a military man who overthrew the government in Mexico in 1832. He seized control of the national government. He didn't like the way things were going. He tried to make them go a different way. There was a lot of chaos and instability way down south in the Mexico City region, a lot of fighting, not quite to the level of a war, but a lot of chaos. And 3 years later, in 1835, Santa Anna decides that he's got to really grab control of this thing. So he announces that he is establishing a dictatorship with himself in charge, and he's dissolving the federal government of Mexico, getting rid of the Constitution. He's going to get things under control, and when he's got them under control, maybe he'll change things back. He doesn't know. But okay, Santa Anna, the dictator. Now, when the news of this spreads north, the American settlers in Texas decide to have a convention to to talk about this development because they don't want to live under a dictatorship. They're not too sure what's going to happen if a dictator's in charge. So they have this convention, they talk things over, and in November of 1835, they vote for self-government, okay, to be in charge of themselves, to reject anything that the Mexican government tells them to do until the federal government and the Constitution is restored. Okay, so listen to what I'm saying, guys. They're not declaring independence. They're saying we're not going to declare it, we're not going to obey this illegal dictatorship in Mexico City until such a time as the legitimate government is restored. We are going to be in charge of ourselves. Okay, now, this is a point in time in Mexico where there's just a lot of instability in general, right? Like I was talking about the civil disorder and chaos down in the Mexico City part of the world. You don't see it on the map here, but Mexico City's right in here, okay? But between 1835 and 1846, there are movements for independence in the Yucatan, in Tamaulipas, Nuevo León, Coahuila, Zacatecas, not to mention in Texas or Texas, okay? This is a tremendously unstable period. When Santa Anna declares the dictatorship, up here in the north in Zacatecas and Coahuila and Tamaulipas, they all do the same thing that Texas did. They also announced that they're not going to obey the government, the illegal dictatorship. So Santa Anna puts an army together and marches north into Zacatecas to start getting things under control up here, right? Oh, so you're rebelling against me? Let me show you why you're not, right? So at the time that the Texans, or the American settlers in Texas, at the time that they announce their self-government, they don't think that there's an army anywhere closer than Mexico City, okay, about 1,000 miles away. What they don't know is that there is an army significantly closer to them, just on the border of Zacatecas and Coahuila, about 500 or 600 miles away. And when Santa Anna hears about what they've done, he says, okay, the pinche gringos are the ones that I've got to get control of first. Pendejos, right? So he takes his army and he starts marching north up to Texas to put a hurting on the Americans that are rebelling against his, from his point of view, legal authority. Okay, now, that's part one. I'm going to take a break really quickly, and then we'll pick up with part two, well, in just a minute.